Imagine, for a moment, that you are not the CEO of a company, but the CEO of a country. Not a startup, not a corporation, a sovereign nation. You oversee roughly 6 million people, small, disciplined population, descendants of Vikings, builders of ships, wind turbines, minimalist furniture, and tiny plastic bricks capable of bringing grown adults to their knees in the dark. On paper, your country should be stable, sensible, predictable, and yet, one morning you open the national accounts and something feels wrong. Your GDP is growing, but not in the way it's supposed to. Not because of shipping lanes, not because of manufacturing, not because of exports or productivity gains or technological revolutions. It's growing because of one company. One single corporation has become so large, so profitable, so globally indispensable that it is now bending the gravity of your entire national economy around itself. This isn't oil. This isn't gas. This isn't rare earth metals or semiconductors. This is a drug, a weekly injection, a clear liquid in a pen-sized syringe that millions of people around the world are pressing into their stomachs in the hope of becoming smaller. The year is 2024. The country is Denmark. And the company has discovered something dangerously close to the holy grail of modern capitalism. A way to silence hunger itself. This is not just a story about weight loss. It is a story about how a pharmaceutical molecule became so valuable it reshaped a national currency, frightened Wall Street, destabilized entire industries, and exposed an uncomfortable truth about modern civilization. We have built an economic system that profits from making us sick, and now we are willing to pay almost anything to escape it. Welcome to the Ozempic economy. Before we can understand how a single Danish pharmaceutical company grew into the economic equivalent of a Caillou towering over shipping firms, energy giants, and even nation-states, we need to understand the battlefield. That battlefield is not the stock market. It's not the factory floor. It's not even your stomach. It's your brain. Imagine walking into a grocery store in 1950. The aisles are narrow. The packaging is dull. Food expires quickly. Sugar is present, but modest. Bread tastes like bread. Calories exist, but they are not screaming at you. Now snap back to the present. You step into a fluorescent-lit maze engineered by behavioral scientists, food chemists, and data analysts. Every color is optimized. Every shelf is positioned to maximize impulse. Every product is designed to hijack your dopamine system with surgical precision. This is not a grocery store. It's a neurological assault. For the last half-century, humanity has been running the largest uncontrolled biological experiment in history. We flooded the planet with ultra-processed, hyperpalatable, calorie-dense substances engineered to bypass satiety and trigger compulsive consumption. And the experiment worked. We didn't just eat more. We became addicted. Today, over 1 billion people globally live with obesity. Not overweight, not borderline, clinically obese. In the United States alone, more than 40% of adults fall into this category. The healthcare costs are staggering, hundreds of billions of dollars per year spent managing diabetes, cardiovascular disease, joint degeneration, and metabolic dysfunction. But here's the part no one likes to say out loud. From an economic perspective, this was a feature, not a bug. Food companies made fortunes selling addictive calories. Healthcare systems generated endless revenue treating the consequences. Pharmaceutical firms monetized chronic disease. The fitness industry thrived on guilt, aspiration, and unused memberships. It became a perfectly closed loop. Consumption created illness. Illness created demand. Demand created profit. For the system, it was elegant. For the individual, it was a prison. Patients have a name for it. They call it food noise. Imagine a radio in your head that never shuts off. A constant whisper, then a shout, then a scream. Eat, snack, crave, reward. Repeat for decades. Society told people trapped in this loop that the solution was discipline, willpower, moral strength. Just eat less. Just move more. Just be better. This advice was not only ineffective, was cruel. It ignored biology. For nearly all of human history, food scarcity was the default condition. Evolution wired us to crave calories, hoard energy, and fear hunger. The human body was designed to survive famine, not abundance. And then, in the span of 2 generations, we surrounded that ancient biology with infinite food, cheap food, engineered food, food designed not to nourish, but to override. Our environment changed faster than our genes could adapt, and biology lost badly. This is where desperation enters the picture. And in economics, desperation creates the most powerful demand of all. If someone could mute that internal radio wave, they could silence the food noise. Not with shame or discipline, but with chemistry, they wouldn't just create a successful product. They would create a new form of currency. They would control access to vanity, health, and self-worth at planetary scale. They would own the most profitable psychological real estate on Earth, and the most unsettling part. The people who discovered this switch weren't even looking for it. They weren't chasing thinness. They were trying to help diabetics survive. The jackpot came later quietly, accidentally, when laboratory rats started getting smaller. And that accident would go on to reshape not just bodies, but economies. To understand how Denmark stumbled into the most powerful economic position it has held since the age of sail, we need to rewind not decades, but millions of years. Because the origin story of the Ozempic economy does not begin in a boardroom. It begins with a lizard. In the early 1990s, the world felt smaller. The internet was still a novelty. Mobile phones were bricks. Globalization was accelerating, but biotechnology was moving slowly, methodically, almost invisibly. Somewhere in the American Southwest, researchers were studying an unlikely creature. The Gila monster, venomous, slow-moving. Ancient, what fascinated scientists wasn't its bite, but its metabolism. The Gila monster can consume an enormous meal, nearly a third of its body weight, and then go weeks, even months, without eating again. Throughout this long fast, its blood sugar remains remarkably stable. That should not be possible. Digging deeper, researchers discovered a compound in the lizard's saliva, a hormone later named exendin-4. This molecule mimicked something humans already produce, naturally GLP-1, or glucagon-like peptide-1. Now, this is where the story quietly becomes dangerous. GLP-1 is one of the body's internal regulators. When you eat, your gut releases it. It tells the pancreas to release insulin. It tells the brain that you're full. It gently applies the brakes. The problem, human GLP-1 is fleeting. It breaks down in minutes. A whisper, not a command. For decades, doctors had tried to use this pathway to help diabetics regulate blood sugar, but the signal never lasted long enough to matter. That's when researchers at a relatively quiet Danish pharmaceutical company became interested. Novo Nordisk had been around for nearly a century. They weren't flashy. They weren't revolutionary. They specialized in insulin, an essential product, but not a disruptive one. Their ambition was modest: stabilize blood sugar more effectively. Their idea was simple in theory and brutal in execution. What if you could redesign GLP-1 so it wouldn't dissolve? What if you could turn a biological whisper into a sustained signal lasting days instead of minutes? They spent years tinkering with molecules, adjusting chains, testing formulations. Their first success was liraglutide daily injection. It worked, somewhat. It helped diabetics. It caused mild weight loss, but it wasn't transformational, so they kept going. Eventually, they engineered a more stable compound, one that could circulate in the bloodstream for an entire week. Semaglutide. At first, it was unremarkable. It was approved in 2017 for one purpose only: managing type 2 diabetes. That was the mission. That was the label. But during clinical trials, doctors noticed something strange. Patients weren't just improving their blood sugar markers. They were shrinking, not slowly, not marginally. Dramatically, patients reported something entirely new: not hunger suppression, but hunger indifference. They would sit in front of food and feel nothing, no craving, no obsession, no internal negotiation. The radio had gone silent. Some participants lost 15 to 20% of their body weight. To understand how extraordinary that is, you need context. Before this drug, only one intervention consistently achieved that level of weight loss: bariatric surgery, a procedure that permanently alters the digestive system with knives, staples, and lifelong complications. And here was a once-weekly injection doing something eerily similar. Novo Nordisk realized slowly Then all at once that they hadn't just created a diabetes drug. They had created a lever on human behavior. They rebranded the same molecule at a slightly higher dose, approved it specifically for obesity, and gave it a new name: Wegovy. Inside Novo Nordisk's headquarters, the data was impossible to ignore. Obesity rates were exploding globally. Healthcare systems were buckling. Governments were desperate. Individuals were exhausted. This wasn't just a blockbuster. This was the pharmaceutical equivalent of the smartphone. But the executives made a crucial miscalculation. They thought the rollout would be slow. Doctors, insurance companies, bureaucracy, gradual adoption. They didn't account for culture. They didn't account for social media. They didn't account for a society obsessed with thinness, discovering what looked like a miracle. By 2022, the drug had escaped the medical journals and entered the algorithm. TikTok, Instagram, celebrity whispers, before and after photos, rumors, shortages. Ozempic became a verb. Doctors were flooded with off-label requests. Clinics emerged overnight. Compounding pharmacies rushed to fill gaps. Demand didn't rise, it went vertical. Novo Nordisk's market capitalization exploded. Within a few years, it surpassed $500 billion. Let that settle. One pharmaceutical company became worth more than the entire annual economic output of Denmark itself. Bigger than legacy energy giants. Bigger than industrial titans. For a brief moment, bigger than Tesla. This wasn't success. This was distortion. And that distortion didn't stay contained within the stock market. It leaked into currency markets, into housing, into national policy, into the very stability of the Danish economy. What happens when a country becomes dependent not on oil, not on trade, but on a molecule? That's where the real story begins. At first glance, Denmark looks like the last country that should ever experience economic instability. It is small, disciplined, export-driven, and famously cautious. No wild deficits, no reckless monetary experiments, no boom and bust culture. But beneath that calm surface sits a fragile mechanism. Denmark does not use the euro. It uses the krone. And unlike the US dollar, the yen, or the pound, the krone does not float freely. It is peg-tethered tightly to the euro at an almost sacred exchange rate, roughly 7.46 kroner to 1 euro. The Danish central bank has one primary mission: defend that peg at all costs. If the krone drifts too high, Danish exports become uncompetitive overnight. If it falls too low, inflation erupts. The peg is stability and instability compressed into a single number. Now enter Novo Nordisk. The vast majority of its blockbuster drugs are sold abroad, particularly in the United States. Americans pay for Ozempic and Wegovy in dollars, lots of dollars. Those dollars don't stay in America. They flow back to Denmark to pay salaries, to fund factories, to settle taxes, to reward shareholders. And every time Novo Nordisk converts those dollars into kroner, it increases demand for the Danish currency. Basic economics takes over. More demand for kroner means a stronger krone. And this is where success becomes a threat. A stronger currency sounds like a good thing until it starts strangling everything else. Danish bacon becomes too expensive. Lego sets lose price competitiveness. Shipping contracts evaporate. Manufacturers get squeezed. This phenomenon has a name: Dutch disease. It was coined in the 1970s when the Netherlands discovered natural gas and accidentally hollowed out its manufacturing base by inflating its currency. Denmark wasn't discovering gas. It was discovering appetite suppression. And the effect was eerily similar. By 2023, Novo Nordisk was responsible for nearly 2/3 of Denmark's economic growth. Without it, the economy would have been flat, stagnant, silent. The central bank had no choice but to intervene, to keep the krone from becoming too attractive. Denmark deliberately kept interest rates lower than much of Europe even as inflation surged elsewhere. While the European Central Bank raised rates aggressively, Denmark held back. The result, surreal butterfly effect. Because Americans were buying Ozempic, Danish homeowners enjoyed cheaper mortgages. Let that sink in. Obesity in the United States was indirectly subsidizing housing affordability in Copenhagen. This is not how economics is supposed to work. Denmark had, in effect, turned itself into a one-asset hedge fund. But instead of oil, it held GLP-1, and hedge funds live and die by concentration risk. If a better drug emerged, if safety data shifted, if public sentiment turned, the krona wouldn't wobble, it would fall. Denmark had built a national prosperity model atop a single molecule land. Molecules, unlike oil fields, can be out-engineered. The question was no longer whether Ozempic was revolutionary. The question was how long it could remain unchallenged. Because while Denmark was adjusting interest rates, the rest of the global economy was adjusting something else. Its consumption patterns, and that would send shockwaves far beyond pharmaceuticals. Every economic revolution creates winners, but it also creates casualties. And the moment Ozempic scale weight loss moved from the clinic into the bloodstream of millions, the losses began to surface quietly at first, then all at once. Because when you change biology at scale, you don't just change bodies, you change demand. In late 2023, an executive at Walmart made an offhand comment that sent tremors through Wall Street. They had been studying internal purchasing data. Something unusual had appeared. Customers picking up prescriptions for GLP-1 drugs were buying less food. Not just fewer snacks, less food, period. The market panicked. For decades, the global food industry had been built on a simple assumption. Calories would keep rising. Portions would grow. Consumption would expand. Obesity was tragic but profitable. Now that assumption cracked. Shares in confectionery companies dipped. Beverage giants stumbled. Processed food producers felt the first cold breath of an existential threat. Because their business model depends on excess. What happens when millions of people suddenly feel full on half the calories? The ripple effects didn't stop at grocery aisles. Airlines noticed something strange too. United Airlines ran the numbers and came to a startling conclusion. If the average passenger lost just 10 pounds, the company would save roughly $80 million per year in fuel costs. Physics doesn't care about social trends. Lighter planes burn less fuel. Multiply that effect across global aviation and suddenly obesity ISN. Just a health issue as a line item in energy efficiency. Then came alcohol. Early data suggested that GLP-1 drugs dulled not just appetite, but desire itself. People reported looking at beer, wine, even hard liquor with indifference. A 10% drop in alcohol consumption would wipe billions off brewery valuations. Wall Street noticed. Medical device companies noticed too. Obesity destroys joints, knees, hips, spines. As weight falls, so does the demand for replacements. Stocks in orthopedic firms wobbled as analysts ran uncomfortable projections. Capital was reallocating away from industries that fed off sickness and toward something new. But toward what, exactly? No one knew. And beneath all this disruption lay a darker question. Who gets access to this future? In Denmark, Ozempic costs a fraction of what it does in the United States. In much of Europe, national health systems negotiate prices aggressively. In America, the same drug can cost over $1,300 per month without insurance. This creates a new class divide. Not rich and poor, thin and struggling. The wealthy subscribe to appetite control. The rest remain trapped in food environments designed to keep them craving. The Ozempic economy doesn't just reshape markets, it reshapes inequality. Basic economics teaches a simple rule. When demand overwhelms supply, markets break. With Ozempic, they didn't just break, they fractured. Pharmaceutical factories are not like app servers. You can't spin them up overnight. Sterile production lines take years to build, validate, and staff. Every step is regulated. Every failure is catastrophic. Novo Nordisk could not scale fast enough. By 2023 and 2024, shortages hit hard and they hit unevenly. The first people to lose access weren't Hollywood celebrities or tech executives. They were diabetics. Patients who depended on the drug to prevent blindness, amputations, heart attacks. They walked into pharmacies and were told the shelves were empty. Why? Because a perfectly healthy professional wanted to lose 10 pounds before summer. This is not a hypothetical dilemma. It played out in real time. The free market does not prioritize need. It prioritizes purchasing power. And where legitimate supply collapses, gray markets flourish. In the United States, a legal loophole allowed compounding pharmacies to manufacture their own versions of semaglutide if the FDA officially listed the drug as in shortage. Suddenly, strip mall clinics appeared overnight. Med spas next to vape shops. Social media ads promising Ozempic alternatives. Unlabeled syringes. Unknown suppliers. Where were they sourcing the raw compounds? Not from Denmark. From chemical labs in China. People began injecting substances they did not understand, acquired from websites that also sold peptides for research use only. The FDA issued warnings. Inspections revealed alarming findings. Some vials contained no semaglutide at all. Others contained insulin dangerous, even lethal for non-diabetics. Some were contaminated saline, but the demand didn't slow. People were willing to inject mystery fluids into their bodies to escape the prison of hunger. This wasn't rational behavior. It was desperation. Novo Nordisk launched lawsuits trying to shut down rogue clinics one by one. But it was like playing whack-a-mole. The incentives were too strong. The profits too tempting. We had entered the Wild West phase of the Ozempic economy. Gold rush dynamics, prospectors, snake oil, fake maps, and while this chaos unfolded, something else was happening quietly in boardrooms across the world. Other countries were watching Denmark, and they were asking a dangerous question. Where is our miracle drug? If Novo Nordisk was the elegant European innovator, then Eli Lilly was the American industrial juggernaut. While Denmark adjusted interest rates and celebrated GDP figures, scientists in Indianapolis were pushing further. Semaglutide mimics one hormone, GLP-1, effective but limited. Eli Lilly's drug, tirzepatide, mimicked two. GLP-1 and GIP, two hands on the piano. The results were staggering. Where Ozempic produced 15 to 20% weight loss, tirzepatide pushed toward 25% and beyond territory once reserved for surgical intervention. Rebranded for obesity as Zepbound, the drug exploded onto the market in late 2023. Eli Lilly's valuation surged. For a moment, it became the most valuable healthcare company on earth. This wasn't just competition. It was a threat to Denmark's economic foundation. Novo Nordisk had proven the market. Eli Lilly was coming to dominate it. For consumers, this arms race was a blessing. For Denmark, it was existential. Because when a country's prosperity depends on a single corporate champion, losing market share isn't just a business problem. It's a national crisis, and this race was only accelerating. Triple hormone drugs entered trials. Early data showed unprecedented results. Obesity was starting to look less like a chronic disease, more like a solvable software bug. A bug patched monthly, for a price. In economics, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. And hacking millions of years of evolution comes with consequences. Rapid weight loss ages faces. Muscle mass disappears alongside fat. Some patients develop gastroparesis stomachs that simply stop moving. Food rots inside the body. Emergency rooms fill. But the most dangerous side effect isn't medical. It's economic dependency. Stop the drug and the hunger returns, louder than before. These aren't cures. They are subscriptions. Pharmaceutical companies haven't sold a product. They've rented the human body. And if payment stops, eviction begins. This creates a terrifying long-term liability. Put 100 million people on these drugs. Who pays the trillion-dollar annual bill? If governments don't pay, obesity returns. If they do, healthcare systems buckle. It is the ultimate too-big-to-fail dilemma. For the first time in human history, being overweight may become a symbol of poverty. Once, fat meant wealth. Today, fitness signals time, money, access. In the Ozempic era, thinness becomes a subscription service. The wealthy mute hunger chemically. The poor remain surrounded by cheap, addictive calories. Denmark saved its economy. But in doing so, it revealed something darker. We are fixing the symptom obesity without fixing the cause. The food system remains toxic. The incentives remain broken. We are mopping the floor while the faucet runs. The shareholders are thrilled. The Ozempic economy is fragile. It rests on a needle, a molecule, and a pegged currency. Whether it saves humanity or bankrupts it remains to be seen. One thing is certain. This wasn't just a drug, it was a mirror. And what it reflected was a world willing to pay anything not to feel hungry physically, emotionally, or economically.